Welcome back to AP World History. This is Chapter 10, Part 3. We'll be talking about the Black Death. To recap what we've talked about Western Europe falling into what they call the Dark Ages after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Barbarians invaded. Culture learning kind of comes to a standstill. Not much scientific investigation. People are living in isolated areas, not much trade, communication. Feudalism develops, the whole system of swearing your loyalty to someone above you. We talked about the church being the glue that holds a society together. They seem to have abbeys and convents and churches throughout Western Europe. Catholicism, the Catholic Church reigns supreme. It has no competition. We also looked at Charlemagne trying to reinstitute the Holy Roman Empire, somewhat successful, although after his death it's divided into three parts, and then from there it's further divided, and it essentially goes back to somewhat what it was before Charlemagne comes on the scene. A lot of independent countries, little kingdoms fighting each other. We talked about the Hundred Years' War between England and France and why that took place. No real victor. And eventually, after 100 years, England will vacate France and France will be under one king. We talked about the architecture and the art reflecting the glory of God, and the arches and so forth, the churches, very impressive. And the church really being the place where information is stored, that the monasteries reproduce books, and not too much scientific investigation, although Latin is adopted and the classic history, it comes from the monks, the teachers. If you're wealthy enough, you can send your child to one of these abbeys or monasteries to receive education. Now we come to the Black Death. Now, the Black Death is one of those things that is going to have a devastating effect on Western Europe. Perhaps it was there was some progress, but this Black Death, as they called it, will wipe out half the population of Western Europe. And certainly there is widespread fear. No one really knows how it got started. Many scholars believe that it came from Asia because they had experienced the plague there. So, as we go through this, we see the real culprit is the bacteria that's carried in the body, the blood of rats. The bacteria is then ingested by fleas who are on the rats, and they ingest the blood, and the bacteria grows in their stomach, in their blood, and then it's regurgitated when the fleas bite humans. So it's not a human-to-human disease, it's a animal-to-flea to human disease. To worsen things, prior to the plague, there had been famines, which devastated the population. In 1315 to 1317, they had crop failures for 3 years because of excessive rain. As many as 15% of the peasants in English village died, mainly from starvation and poverty, and just a weakened immune system. Susceptibility to disease is prevalent. In 1347, this map shows where the plague started. Recorded history at the time, historians pieced it back together, and they do believe that it comes from Asia, the bacteria. Some of the symptoms that people have: The bolus is the swelling, large nodules on the body, the neck, underneath the chin, and underneath the arms. They tried to lance these, which did no good. Septicemic form is basically it's transmitted through blood. When it reaches this stage, it's pretty much 100% mortality rate. As far as the disease cycle is concerned, again, the rats drink or have the blood with the bacteria. Other rodents can carry it. And then rats have fleas, and the fleas bite and suck the blood from the rats, and then it grows in their stomach, and then the flea regurgitates it into the human, and the human is then infected. Medieval art and the plague. Many believe that it was a judgment from God or the devil. Most believe that they were sinners and that God was somehow punishing them for their sins. This shows how widespread the disease was and where it hit. And you can see that Poland, for some reason, and a small area what is now Holland, didn't report too many cases of the plague for whatever reason. There were many attempts to drive the plague out. This is the doctor's robe, and he's chasing the spirits away. Leeching was common to try to suck the bad blood out of the person. Of course, all these things failed. Flagellant, that is, they were beating themselves, whipping their backs, bloodying themselves to do penance before God for their sins. Again, this didn't stop the plague. This is a poem about the plague. A sickly season, the merchant said. The town I left was filled with dead, and everywhere these queer red flies crawled up the corpses' eyes, eating them away. Fair make you sick, the merchant said. They crawled up upon the wine and bread. Pale priest and oil and books, bulging eyes and crazy looks, dropping like flies. I had to laugh, the merchant said. The doctors purged and dosed and bled, and proved through solemn disreputation their cause lay in some constellation. Then they began to die. First they sneezed, the merchant said, and then they turned the brightest red, begged for water, and then fell back with bulging eyes and face turned black. They waited for the flies. I came away, the merchant said. You can't do business with the dead. So I've come here to ply my trade. You'll find this to be a fine brocade. Then I sneezed. Well, this poem sums up the fact that nothing that they seemed to do worked, and apparently the merchant in the end had contracted the disease. Again, the mortality rate was about 35 to 70%, and 25 million people died. This is a tremendous setback to the advancement of Western Europe, and it's going to take some time for them to recover from this. Trade came to what trade there was came to a stop. People were afraid to move around. They weren't just sure what was causing the problem. And that comes to the end of chapter 10.